Okay, we're in the greater geographical area of what is known as the Cove of the Withlacoochee. We're also in, more specifically in current terms, the Half Moon WMA. We're standing in the center of what has been known as Alto Cemetery. The town of Alto was a turpentine lumbering camp. It's probably 3 or 4 miles south of here. The FWC guy that I met today says this is known as the Davies Cemetery. So I don't know who's right, and I haven't had time to research it. And I really don't care at this point. I just am here back again at this marvelous, incredible little forest cemetery. Now, what makes this area significant historically in U.S. history is the Cove of the Withlacoochee was the major Seminole Indian stronghold from the time of the end of the Second Seminole War, the First Seminole War, up until the beginning and during the Second Seminole War. And that is incredible. There were within 20 miles in either direction, in several different directions of this area, were fought 3, 4, or 5 major battles. The Battle of Wahoo Swamp, I forget the name of it, but the one that General Clinch fought is not far from here, and then a couple of others whose name of them escapes me right now. But we know of personally some archaeological not excavations, but investigations that are being conducted in the Cove of the Withlacoochee, and we do think that we found one of those sites. It's just sort of a halfway, semi-educated wild guess, but we were in it a little bit ago, and it was just astonishing. Anyway, back to where the present, or I should say 100 years later, rather than almost 200 years later, we're in one of the top, coolest cemeteries you could possibly be in. And we're going to check out the stones. This is from the pioneers who came here for the lumber turpentine, and passed away during the time that they lived here. So we're going to check out their stones. Thank you. Here's a daughter, sacred to the memory. And these were Sarah Potter, 1906. So there's another grave here from the 1895, 1896, something like that. Here's one from 1800. So we know that these people lived here. These towns existed a good 10 years.
One day.
This is...
Infant. Aw.
Oh, poor little thing. I didn't even read that. I didn't read the beginning. I just read the end. And you have to know, too, that these stones represent a significant expenditure. Significant cash outlay. Well, here, this is interesting. This is 1871 to 1980. Not only was this person older than hell, they came back here in 1980 to be interred. That's pretty neat. Can't really read anything else about this one. Here's 1886. So in 1886, that's 20 years from 1906. So for 20 years, people lived out in these woods, or in this area, I should say, out in these woods, and were buried. We know from other historical research that a lot of cypress lumbering went on. In fact, earlier today, the lovely research assistant, I should say the loveliest research assistant, and I were on one of the tram rails, which is the old railroad bed for pulling in and out of, pulling the cypress logs in and out. And here's R.T. Bellamy, who passed in 1894. So for at least 22 years, people were being interred here. So it's just pretty exciting stuff. And someone obviously knows about this, as they've kept up the fencing around. And this has a very government feel to it, this fencing. So it kind of reminds me Well, now I was going to say it reminds me of Tucker Hill, but Tucker Hill is actually has wire fencing, so I'll have to retract that. And as with all these plots, we know that in this area that we're looking at right now, that we don't see any stones at, there's still graves there. They just don't have any markers, so they're the unmarked grave, which is also very compelling. Come on, man, get up off me. Go do something else. Okay, so anyway, that's it for the lovely research assistant and me. We are out.